Welcome to today's Explainer. We're kicking off this chalkboard masterclass with a deep dive into a really fascinating BIS working paper. It's called The Anatomy of Stablecoin Transactions, authored by Fabian Schaer, Anneke Kosse, Tara Rice, Takeshi Shirakami, and Jirapat Siridhasanakul. And just a quick reminder up front, as always, this analysis is strictly for research and educational purposes. Okay, we are going to reconstruct this paper step by step and figure out how the world is actually using programmable money. Here's our syllabus for today. We'll start with the payment illusion, define transfers versus transactions, and then dissect the on-chain data. From there, we'll look at the sheer scale of complexity, see how different stablecoins completely diverge, and wrap up with the big policy implications. Let's get into it. Section 1, the stablecoin payment illusion, moving beyond digital cash. We really have to confront a foundational assumption here. Do stablecoins act exactly like digital cash? You know, when we see a token move from wallet A to wallet B, our brains instantly categorize it as a simple payment. Like, oh, someone's buying a coffee or maybe sending money back home. But here is our core research question. Are we actually looking at simple peer-to-peer payments, or are we looking at complex, programmable settlement layers? Because if we just treat these tokens as digital cash, we might be completely distorting our understanding of the economic reality. In the world of programmable blockchains, financial operations, things like swapping, lending, putting up collateral, they are all bundled together. And this matters immensely, seriously, because if policymakers and standard-setting bodies misunderstand how these networks actually function, they are going to miss massive systemic risks that are just hiding in plain sight. Think about traditional finance for a second. Wholesale money settlements between huge institutions are deeply systemic. So if stablecoins are actually being used to settle massive, complex wholesale market transactions, what we call financial market infrastructures, or FMIs, then regulating them like a simple retail payment app, well, that's not just wrong, it's genuinely dangerous. Moving to Section 2, transfers versus transactions defined, building our lexicon. Before we write any data on the board, we really need to separate the broader instruction from the granular flow of the asset itself. The authors make a great point here. To understand the ecosystem, we have to stop conflating two very different technical concepts. Imagine drawing a giant envelope on the board. That envelope is the transaction. It's the bundled sequence of operations that execute all at once, atomically. Now, inside that envelope are a bunch of individual receipts. Those receipts are the transfers, the granular event logs emitted by a smart contract that record a single isolated change in token ownership. So the transaction gives us the economic context, while the transfer is literally just a single data point inside of it. Let's sketch out a concrete example to make this super clear. Imagine Alice is swapping USDC for PYUSD on a decentralized exchange. To execute this one single transaction, an entire sequence fires off. Step 1, the exchange contract triggers. Step 2, a liquidity pool pulls 100 USDC from Alice. Step 3, the pool sends a calculated amount of PYUSD back to her. Now, if you're only looking at transfers, you just see 3 totally disconnected movements of money. You'd completely miss the fact that this whole thing was a single unified currency swap. Section 3, dissecting the on-chain data and the methodology behind it. To track these events without leaning on flawed behavioral assumptions, the authors didn't just guess what users were doing based on wallet labels. No, they went straight to the raw, verifiable cryptography. And the scale here is just staggering. They extracted 593 million event logs across 141 million Ethereum transactions from the year 2025. They focused on 3 heavy hitters: USDT, USDC, and PYUSD. So we're not talking about a tiny sample size here. This is a macroscopic view of the entire network's plumbing. And to process this absolute mountain of data, they used a beautifully replicable methodology. They didn't rely on some black box AI guessing game. Instead, they spun up their own archive node to pull standardized cryptographic event signatures. These are literally the mathematical hashes baked directly into the smart contracts. By mapping these signatures to public factory contracts, they created a purely objective, step-by-step measure of computational complexity. It's brilliant. Section 4, the scale of complexity, or what we'll call the 60% illusion. So with our terms clearly defined and our data collected, we arrive at this massive structural illusion. From a top-down transaction perspective, meaning if we're just looking at those big envelopes, simple peer-to-peer payments actually appear to dominate the landscape. Simple transfers make up about 68.4% of the transaction volume. Only 31.6% are complex, multi-step transactions, like lending or decentralized exchange swaps. If you stop the analysis right here, you'd probably think, see, stablecoins really are just digital cash. But wow, this next part brilliantly illustrates the illusion. Look what happens when we zoom in on the granular transfer logs, those individual receipts. Because complex operations generate dozens, sometimes even hundreds, of internal accounting steps. Nearly 60% of all stablecoin transfers are actually hidden inside those complex multi-asset bundles. Think about that. If you analyze stablecoins just by counting transfers, you are misclassifying almost 6 in 10 events. You're basically measuring the internal gears of a complex financial engine and mistaking them for people buying cups of coffee. Section 5. Not all stablecoins are equal. Looking at ecosystem divergence. Okay, so we've established that complexity is widespread. But is this behavior uniform? Are all stablecoins just identical cogs in the machine? Absolutely not. If we map out the daily transfer volumes for USDC, USDT, and PYUSD, it instantly reveals a massive difference in scale. USDT and USDC process hundreds of thousands, sometimes over 1 million transfers daily, whereas PYUSD is down in the thousands. And it's not just about volume. Their structural profiles completely diverge. Look at this breakdown. PYUSD operates mostly during American business hours and is heavily skewed towards simple retail-like payments. It also pays higher priority fees, which suggest very different routing behaviors. USDC and USDT, on the other hand, act as deeply composable wholesale settlement layers. They are heavily embedded in complex, decentralized finance protocols, and their activity really spikes during European and EMEA business hours. So they aren't interchangeable at all. They are serving fundamentally distinct economic functions. Finally, Section 6, Conclusions and Policy Implications. It is time to wipe the chalkboard clean and synthesize everything we've covered. Academically speaking, this thesis contributes an incredibly robust, verifiable framework for measuring on-chain complexity, entirely without relying on subjective labels. Now, the authors do note a few limitations. For instance, their model can't capture off-chain data or hidden builder fees, what's known as MEV, where users pay for transaction priority outside the normal fee structure. But this paves an exciting way for future research, especially into how traditional macroeconomic shocks might ripple through these complex on-chain structures. Let's boil this down. Please write down these 3 key takeaways from today's explainer because they completely reframe how we should understand digital asset ecosystems. 1. Stablecoins are programmable settlement layers natively embedded in smart contract infrastructure, not just digital cash. 2. Analyzing standalone transfers rather than full transactions creates a massive statistical bias, literally misclassifying 60% of network activity. And 3. Stablecoin designs are fundamentally heterogeneous. USDC, USDT, and PYUSD have entirely different behavioral footprints. So I'll leave you with this final thought to ponder. We've just proven, step by step on the chalkboard, that stablecoins are acting as the automated clearinghouses and settlement layers of a totally new financial internet. As these complex engines continue to scale, how will the old world of finance survive the shift to programmable money? Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer, and as always, keep questioning the data.